1947, World War II was over. America was the most dominant nation on the planet, alone in the world with nuclear power. The war brought with it tremendous advancements. But as life returned to normal, the advancements now were cultural ones, not military. In Paris, Christian Dior dazzled the fashion world with new styles. While in Los Angeles, Howard Hughes proved the largest aircraft ever built, originally intended for military use, could really fly. But farther east, near the elite Air Force base that sent the Enola Gay to Hiroshima, and the location of the only existing atomic bomb in the world, something that had been flying crashed. Today, it's simply called the Roswell incident. But mere mention of this eastern New Mexico town evokes images of UFOs, aliens, and government conspiracy. It all began in the Pacific Northwest, where the term flying saucer was born. Just a few days before the Roswell incident, on June 24, 1947, Kenneth Arnold was flying his single-engine airplane near Mount Rainier in Washington state. Arnold was a private pilot, helping to search for downed military transport. On this clear and sunny afternoon, Arnold was startled by a reflection from what he presumed was another plane. But when he turned to get a better look, he saw 9 crescent-shaped aircraft flying in rapid formation about 25 miles away. They seemed to move erratically, like saucers skipping across water. He thought they were military jets, but he was surprised by their long, flat shape and high speed. Back on the ground, he asked what they were. Others had seen the objects, but no one had an explanation, including the government. During the next 3 weeks, hundreds of separate sightings were reported in newspapers across the United States. The Roswell incident was one of them, reported on July 8th in the Roswell Daily Record. Wreckage from something strange was collected from a ranch outside the Air Force Base at Roswell. Initially, it was acknowledged by the military to be the remains of a flying saucer. But within hours, this explanation was changed. It was merely a weather balloon. The Air Force was confused, either about what the object was or what to tell the public. In a 2-week period, our nation had gone from obscure knowledge about UFOs to multiple sightings and an actual downed craft. One that some still maintain brought our first encounter with live aliens. One thing was sure, as a memo from Air Force General Nathan Twining states, the phenomena reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. This was General Twining's official opinion concerning flying discs. And it must have caused quite a stir because in December 1947, U.S. Air Force Headquarters directed Twining to establish a secret program to investigate UFO phenomena. It was to be called Project Sign. Several months later, the military investigators of Project Sign concluded that UFOs were real and that there were in fact extraterrestrial vehicles. Publicly, President Truman acknowledged that flying saucers are not constructed by any power on Earth. Project Sign's conclusion, however, was not acceptable to Air Force Chief of Staff General Hoyt Vandenberg, and the program was scrapped. By 1949, the issue of flying saucers was considered to be top secret. The U.S. government was worried that if the public knew it took UFOs seriously, panic and chaos would result, like it did on Halloween in 1938, when Orson Welles broadcast The War of the Worlds on radio. The post-war climate was tense with the chill of the Cold War in the air. What if the Soviets were to release bogus UFO reports in America? Indeed, UFO reports persisted, and a new project, codenamed Grudge, was formed. The military considered it a fitting name. Project Grudge didn't last long. Within a year, it was shut down, having found 1/4 of all UFOs to be unexplainable. Then came 1952, when the steady stream of sightings became a tidal wave of paranoia. The government reactivated Grudge as Project Blue Book. By early August, so many UFOs were seen and tracked on radar over Washington, D.C., that the U.S. Air Force called a press conference to clear the air.
Since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations.
Air Force Intelligence Chief Major General John Samford would go on to claim the sightings over the nation's capital were due to a temperature inversion that had deflected light from the ground and somehow tricked radar into false readings. But a Project Blue Book file tells the story of an encounter between two Air Force F-94s and the Washington UFOs, concluding that no theory exists at the present time as to the origin of the objects, and they are considered to be unexplained. For his part, General Samford did not dismiss UFOs entirely.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve.
Some believe the National Security Agency, the NSA, was created to do just that, resolve the UFO crisis. Formed within 3 months of the Washington sightings, it remains the most secretive agency in the U.S. government. The sightings over the Capitol had created a buzz of activity in government offices. Privately, the FBI was briefed by its Air Force liaison, who stated the objects sighted may possibly be ships from another planet, such as Mars. At the same time, the CIA convened a panel of scientists to discuss UFOs, which concluded that national security was not the problem. The greater concern was the reaction of the public. The conclusion of the Robertson panel, as it was called, seemed to encourage a cover-up. The government line now was that the military was just doing its job, investigating every sighting, while everyday citizens were doing what came naturally. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel L.J. Tacker put on the military's sympathetic face.
Actually, most people who report a UFO sighting are patriotic citizens who have been mystified by something that they've seen, and through a patriotic sense, report it to the local law enforcement officials or to the United States Air Force base near them.
But to Tacker, seeing was not believing. Despite General Twining's memo stating that flying saucers were real, Tacker emphatically announced that there never has been an official Air Force conclusion that flying saucers are real. Patriotic or not, UFOs were no more than unidentified objects in the air. Documents from the 1950s have since emerged suggesting that while Tacker was refuting the existence of UFOs, an elite group of a dozen top military officials, including General Twining, were probing the issue of UFOs and aliens in secret. Codenamed Majestic, this committee was so secretive that to this day, no one is sure or no one will reveal whether it truly existed or not. Perhaps Majestic was concerned about the ballooning reports of UFOs around the world. One of these occurred on October 4th, 1955, when a U.S. Army staff colonel named Hathaway and 2 other men were riding on a train in the Soviet Union near the Caspian Sea. Suddenly, a 4th man entered the compartment yelling for them to look out the window. Off in the distance, a rotating circular craft with 2 stationary lights was rising up from the ground. Moments later, it was gone. The 4th man was United States Senator Richard Russell, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Here was a sighting that the military, the FBI, and the CIA had to take seriously. Colonel Hathaway issued a report in which he said, "We've been told for years that there isn't such a thing as a flying saucer, but all of us saw it." By the late 50s, UFOs had become rooted in pop culture. The government feared it wouldn't be long before alien phenomena would exert a psychological hold over the American people. Logical explanations had to be found for every UFO encounter. As long as they could be explained, America was safe. But on September 24, 1959, in Redmond, Oregon, hundreds of citizens felt far from safe as they watched Air Force jets intercept a UFO that was hovering over their town. The object easily eluded the jets, but its profile was detailed in radar logs from that day. Air Force explanations for what its jets were chasing ranged from it was nothing, to it was a weather balloon, to it was Venus. Citizens began to take charge. In the late 50s and 60s, a number of independent groups were formed to study extraterrestrial phenomena. And there was plenty to study. A wave of sightings in the mid-1960s put the nation on edge and led to congressional hearings on UFOs.
So you will see that this, instead of being a subject for ridicule and a big joke, actually is a serious matter which could affect the lives of all of us.
The military was forced to act. The U.S. Air Force commissioned a study designed to resolve the UFO issue, led by self-proclaimed UFO disbeliever Dr. Edward Condon. Early in 1969, the results were released. UFOs were without substance or significance and should no longer be studied. Critics were amazed at the conclusion, given that some panel members admitted finding cases like the Redmond, Oregon encounter to be baffling. Condon himself admitted that a third of the reviewed cases were found to have no satisfactory explanation whatsoever. But this was all that was needed for the Air Force to shut down Project Blue Book. In anticipation of its demise, the military released a brief interview with Project Head Major Hector Quintanilla, who described Blue Book's function.
The objectives of the program are twofold. They're the same as they have been since 1953 when the regulation was written. First of all, to try to determine if the UFO phenomena presents a threat to the security of the United States. And second, to determine if the UFO phenomena exhibits any technological advances which could be channeled into research and development.
No mention was made about explaining the persistence of UFO sightings. The point all along seemed more than ever to be one of pacifying the American people. And when that couldn't be done, the answer was to close the file. Was it a cover-up?
Our critics continually charge that the United States Air Force is withholding information from the general public on this subject. This is absolutely untrue. We are not hiding anything. We have nothing to hide. There is nothing in Air Force files, in either the classified files or the unclassified files, that come to a conclusion that spaceships have visited the Earth.
However, a now declassified NSA document from 1968 entitled UFO Hypothesis and Survival Questions shows the government's alarm that a confrontation with aliens would result in a tragic loss of identity in which our society would be absorbed by the alien one. Clearly, the government was concerned, but without Project Blue Book, it would no longer have to make public statements about UFOs. Late in 1969, amid the excitement of America's first lunar landing, Project Blue Book ended. The government no longer had any official involvement in U.S. study or investigation. Some UFOologists have suggested that the government wanted to remove the issue from public scrutiny so that it could continue experimentation without interference. A memo issued by Air Force General C.H. Bolender in the fall of 1969 indicates that the truly unidentifiable UFOs are not part of the Blue Book system. But if the truly remarkable UFO cases weren't in Project Blue Book, where did they go? And given that UFO encounters have persisted, where do they go today? Some UFO investigators think they know the answer. Area 51, Groom Lake, Nevada, Dreamland. In the mid-1990s, just after Senator Stephen Schiff announced a government audit to unlock documents related to the Roswell incident, the government annexed 4,000 acres of land surrounding the military base here. Land that is protected by signs threatening the use of deadly force. Area 51's classification is above top secret. So secret that the government will not admit it even exists. But many recent UFO sightings in the Southwest have fueled speculation about the facility. Could it be a test site for UFO technology? This flurry of recent activity has energized a number of independent efforts. In June 1998, a panel of skeptical scientists, privately financed, was convened at Stanford University to review the evidence of UFOs and aliens. It was the first major scientific review since the Condon Committee 30 years earlier. Their conclusion? Continuous study of UFOs may provide valuable insight into scientifically unexplained phenomena. In reviewing the history of UFOs since 1947, the panel added, "It is remarkable that the scientific community has exhibited so little curiosity in the past. Perhaps that can now change." As a member of the scientific community, Albert Einstein once said, "We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library whose walls are covered to the ceiling with books written in many different tongues. We sense a plan, a mysterious order, but we simply don't know what it all means."